So today we're continuing on a communal rule of love. And as a lot of us have a love-hate relationship with the word rule, and it's often been an exclusionary term to decide who's in and out for some of us. For others of us, it's been, I don't know, a competition, I guess. It kind of resorts to that. But when we talk about a rule of life, a rule of love, especially communal rule of love, we're talking about life. And I need you to advance me there, Kim, if you can. Yeah? Yay! All right. And we were arguing about whether this was part 4 or 5 or 6 today. But hey, the kids are here. Were we supposed to say something? They're all good? Okay. Okay. I think we had a few things for them to do, but it looks like they've got them. So I'm not sure whether this is part 3 or 5, because I think what we did at Thanksgiving was part of a communal rule of love. We practiced the year of Thanksgiving. I think what Sini shared on the first Sunday of October about her journey of reconciliation and that Indigenous communion we had together as part of a rule of life. How many know if we're going to have a rule of love together, there has to be food? There has to be food. So we'll make sure that happens. And Flo, of course, shared about journaling. What I heard in that is that you take time to stop and pay attention to your heart, which is not easily done in a world where we're ramping it up. It's so accelerated and stimulated and distracted. And so just that simple exercise of sitting down with our journal, however we do that, and whenever we do that, and asking, what am I mad, sad, glad about? What am I afraid of? And some of the other feelings, disappointed, ashamed. Just paying attention to our feelings, I think, is an important part of the rule of life. So, can I give you a signal, or can I work it from here? Go ahead. So again, life is not a game of winners and losers. Life is a gift given to us so we can learn to love well. And if you think about it, there are opportunities. That's a good yawn, Ron. What I like is you're behind everybody so that you won't be contagious. But just think about this life. We have an opportunity to love here that we won't have an opportunity to love in eternity. You think about it. Think of the opportunities we have to forgive enemies, to love those who hate us, to face the overdose crisis in our city, homelessness, mental illness, food insecurity, youth suicide, special needs, brother or sister sandpaper. All of those are opportunities that we have in this life to love well that we wouldn't have in heaven or eternity or in the life to come, the age to come. So while this already not yet is painful, it's an opportunity. What if we approach this crazy time that we're in right now, post kind of COVID, kind of. What if we approached it rather than, oh no, not another wave, oh no. What if we approached it as an opportunity to love? So, and we're drawing this communal rule of love. We're not making this up. This comes from church history. And as Lucy writes to, is it Linus? I think it's Linus, or is that Charlie Brown? Charlie Brown. She says, when writing about church history, we have to go back to the very beginning. Our pastor was born in 1930. Okay, I wasn't quite that. I'm not quite that. But we're talking about something that is much more ancient. Hundreds and centuries that goes back to that time in church history when there was this desperation of the times they lived in. Instead of seeing it as a problem, they saw it as an opportunity. And there's three things about the rule of life that I think we need to understand. Number one, it's not one size fits all. Those are the kind of rules that we read about in our text today, Jeremiah 31, that God said He's going to do away with. Those one size fits all rules that exclude some, include others, that create us and them. God says, I love this. Oh, there's just that tender. It was worth it just for that, to read that text. They shall all know me, from the least to the greatest. I love that. Because God's going to come and write His law on our hearts. Rule of love. One rule, Paul said, in the New Covenant, to love. If you love, then you're not going to steal. If you love, you're not going to be unfaithful to your partner. If you love, you're not going to lie, deceive. So he writes about that in Romans 13. So often, it's not this one size fits all, but often we think that about rules. But it's catered to the time that we live in. As Frodo said, I wish it need not happen in my time. And Gandalf replies, and so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for us to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. What's the opportunity for us? What's the invitation for us? There have been unique temptations in church in each period of history to be unloving. And, we saw this, of course, with things like the Crusade, extreme examples. But when I moved to Vancouver, I wouldn't have needed this communal rule that I need now. That when you're at the dinner table, no phones. How many know in 1990 you didn't need that rule, right? What other kind of rules today do you have that maybe we didn't need 30 years ago? Crazy changing world, isn't it?
How to share the remote.
What's that?
How to share the remote.
How to share the remote. Good one. Yeah. The rule of love for the remote. Who gets the channel surfing for this block of time? Anybody else? Anything else you can think of? So they'll come. Be thinking about that. The second thing about the rule of love is not only knowing the time, but knowing yourself. Each of us is wired a certain way. Each of us rests differently, replenishes differently. Extrovert, introvert, that kind of thing. So knowing yourself, what time of day is best for you, for silence and solitude. What are your gifts and passions? What is the gift of love that God has designed in you to give away to the world? And thirdly, what season are you in? See, how I Sabbath when I had young children is different than how I Sabbath now. I remember when I was a young preacher, I got really inspired by John Wesley, who got up at 4 o'clock every morning to pray. I thought, well, that's cool. So I did that for a while, and then I found out he went to bed at 9 o'clock. I went to bed at midnight. I was a youth pastor. So, knowing yourself. So, this, can you move your head there, Kim?
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. We're working through this. Don't worry. Peace on you, Kim. It's all right. So the rule involves resistance and embrace. And if you can just give me the next one there.
Yeah, so I'm just leaving it.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay.
There we go. So resistance means saying no, resisting the unique temptations of our time to be unloving. And it's resisting speed, resisting distractions, resisting the need for excessive stimulation due to not confronting our own inner emptiness. How many times have I heard somebody say, I'm bored? But boredom starts here. It starts, if you're bored, you're boring. And I don't mean that as an insult. What I mean is that you have not come to grips with that inner chasm in your heart. And so you need outside stimulation, right? To keep you going. That's the temptations of our time. 30-second soundbite, right? So it was in the ancient tradition when the church went off the rails and became synonymous with empire, there had to be a way to resist. So we saw the monastic movement emerge where people by the thousands fled this hybrid of state and church that had become so corrupt. And they went into the desert to be purified. But it wasn't to escape. It was missional. It was so they could be more effective in serving the world. So the rule of love is also saying yes. It's resistance, but it's embrace. Saying yes, that we are chosen and beloved by God. We're saying yes to that. So that, and then here's the thing. How many here that have been in the faith long enough have had problems with those scriptures that talk about us being chosen by God before the foundation of the world? You know, I don't mind being chosen by God. It feels good. But what I don't like is this idea that some have not been. Right? And when I had my nervous breakdown, I couldn't go to sleep at night for years. And the only way that I could, without over heavily medicating myself, was to memorize scripture. Memorize huge chunks. I almost memorized the whole book of Ephesians, and I would just recite it in my sleep, or as I was going to sleep, and I would fall asleep. And it still works to this day. Sometimes when I have insomnia, that's what I will do. The problem is, I really know the first part of the book really well. I don't know the last one. I keep falling asleep. And I just love those first few verses. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us with every spiritual blessing in heavenly places, according as He has chosen us in Him before the foundation of the world. Now, if that doesn't make you feel secure, nothing does. I mean, He already decided before the world was made that I was chosen. And I love Him. What I don't like is this double predestination that is sometimes been the theological. I've been chosen, others have not. Others have been chosen to be not chosen. Others have been chosen to go, even worse, go to hell. God has destined some for hell. Is it any wonder that some of our religion is a bit toxic with the idea of a God like that? Right? Well, I must thank N.T. Wright. And through the years, God has given some tremendous grace to me for this. But here's what helped me as N.T. Wright was going through those difficult passages in his Romans for Everyone, through Romans 9. Remember those passages about God selecting some and others, 9, 10, and 11. He says it's all about mission. It has nothing to do with who's special and who's not. It has everything to do with mission. The very first time that we see God choosing someone, selecting them, and making them special was the call of God on Abraham. And why was Abraham chosen? He was chosen to be a blessing to all the families of the earth. We've been chosen and made special so that we, as God's instrument, can show others that they are also chosen and special. And this was meant to be an ongoing cycle of love, like a ripple effect that reverberates through the universe. We are chosen and beloved so that we can show others that they are chosen and beloved, so they can show others. You get that? You get what's happening there? So it's missional. So, again, I'm doing a bit of review today, but Jesus talked about, I am the vine, you are the branches. He talked about this rule of life. It's a divine-human partnership. And we're dealing with powerful forces. Could I use this word? The gravitational pull of the false self. We need some help to get the vines off the ground and to bear fruit. So when Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches, if you remain in me, How do we do that? And the rule of love is God's means of grace for us to abide, to stay in the life, stay in the vine. Remembering without Him we can do nothing. Now I was telling Karen, when I walked my granddogs by the church this morning at about 8 o'clock, and kind of swing by a doggy park, let them run their heads off. And then we walked around here, came around the church, and I was just thinking about this idea of the trellis. Remember we said the rule is like a trellis. And a trellis is a structure that helps vines and other kinds of plants grow. And as I was thinking about it, I crossed the street. Now, where are we now? What direction is that? South. Yeah. So I was walking south along here. And as I crossed the street, I saw a woman with 2 children walk out of their garden with a trellis. They're holding a trellis. And they set it up, lean it against the fence. In fact, if you go out today, you'll probably still see it. They're getting ready to do something. But it really struck me that when we say communal rule of life, this is not something we just do independently. It's actually a communal act. And it involves kids. It involves the generations. Listening to each other, talking to each other about what helps us love, what takes away love. So, again, I just want to show you how this works. This is some examples in our neighborhood that we have. You got some of these, don't you, Kirsten? Yeah. And some of them double as fences and gates. I don't know, that's just a bunch of nice flowers or something. This is our resort at Spirit Ranch, the vineyard in the springtime. Now it's a little later in the year. You see how it's so important for this vine and the branches. I wonder if Jesus wasn't talking about. Let's work together to build a trellis for your life so that the vine can bear fruit in your life. Yeah. And as Paul said, this idea of the trellis is something that involves an effort on God's part and our part. But it's still grace. Even the very energy and grace to come up with a trellis requires grace. By the grace of God I am what I am, and His grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me. Now, a lot of my discipleship in the last week has been, the last few weeks since our son arrived, has been going through this series. I think this is from Tolkien's Silmarillion, I believe. I'm not a Tolkien expert. But this is the Rings of Power that's showing on Prime Video right now. And this is my favorite. My favorite character is this little gal named Nori. Her name is Nori Brandyfoot. And she's what's called a Harfoot. Now, I didn't know what a Harfoot is. I mean, I watched The Hobbit, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. But I found out that the Harfoots are the nomadic ancestors of what we commonly know as the hobbits. Important fact for your eternal well-being. So she befriends this stranger who falls from the sky in a ball of fire. And when everybody else in the community, they're kind of this nomadic, wandering community, when they're all suspicious of him and reject him, she befriends him. And I'm not going to give too much away. I have my theories on who this guy really is, but we can talk about that another time. I don't want to be a spoiler here. But there's this point where he's leaving and she offers to accompany him, and they're bantering back and forth. And he says, alone is just, or I think they're talking about going on a journey and adventure and all this. And he says these words to her, alone is just a journey. He's about to leave and she's going to go with him. He says, alone is just a journey, but adventures, they must be shared. So, I felt that was very profound and powerful with regards to this season, this time that we're in, is God is inviting us to share the journey. And then it becomes more than just a journey. It becomes an adventure. So, last time I kind of did a full teaching, I talked about how do we structure our trellis. And there's some general guidelines, and we handed this to you as you came in the door today. You can pull that out. But we designed it based on the 2 great commandments that Jesus said that summarize the rule of love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. If anyone doesn't have one, just raise your hand. We'll get one to you. Kathleen needs one. Thank you. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. When Jesus was asked what is the great commandment, and the second one is like unto this, love your neighbor as yourself, and you can't separate the two. You can't say, well, I love God. He said, it's just inseparable. In fact, he implies there's a third one that's implied. Love yourself. So be kind to yourself. Be good to yourself. Be patient with yourself. What is love described as in 1 Corinthians 13? Love is patient. Love is kind. Love believes and hopes. So these three, it's like a threefold strand, right? And then we developed 4 quadrants. Prayer, rest, relationships, and vocation. I got a lot of this from the emotionally healthy spirituality people, adapted a little bit, and we'll continue to adapt, because, as I said, it's tailor-made. We can't just assume that someone else's rule is ours. But I think there's some good general guidelines that we can be thinking about when we love God, love our neighbor, and love ourselves. So under the category of prayer, we have 4 things. We have silence, which is called apophatic prayer. So what I'd like you to do is with your worksheet, just holding it in your hand, if you have a pen and something to write on, maybe grab a book in front of you. I'm just going to kind of lectio you through this schema. And I want you to be listening for what might be alive for you today in this place. In your life, the season that you're in. And be listening for the invitations that God is giving with regards to some pedals to push in your own rule of love. So when we say apophatic, it's a fancy theological term for prayer that is without words and even without thoughts. That seems hard. But it's what's called, the mystics called it non-discursive prayer. And it's the prayer silence where you go into your heart. And it is hard work. It is not easy. And it takes a lot of practice. But I think it is one of the most essential practices and rules that needs to be implemented in our lives in this very stimulated and distracted world. This practice of silence. And so we will take some time in the coming weeks to do this together. And Nathan has offered open the church on Wednesday night for silent night, just to come and practice. Can I say this? As you begin to do this, set a certain time, set your alarm, do it, and we'll provide some guidelines for you, but don't worry if your mind wanders. Don't worry if you have what they used to call monkey brain, where your brain just goes, it just swings from the trees, doesn't it? What I like to do is take a sacred word and keep coming back to the river. The river is God. The river, and that river is in my heart. In fact, Thomas Merton said, in your heart is this infinite chasm. Sounds scary, doesn't it? But the chasm is the love of God. And it's eternal. And it's in you. Right? That's why you don't ever need to be bored again. And you know that inside of you is an inbuilt Disneyland with all kinds of rides. Right? But that takes work. It's not easy to learn that. And the second is prayer without ceasing. So this is introducing all kinds of prayer. Praying with the Psalms. I think we need to take advantage of written prayers that have already been written in books. The books of common prayer, things like that. prayer in tongues, prayer with worship, like we did this morning, prayers of thanksgiving, all these different kinds of prayer. Learning to pray without ceasing. And even when there's not the verbal, the silent prayer tells us we're still praying. Shaped by Scripture. So we always want to be a community that is shaped by the story that we're in. And keep coming back to that. Electio Divina together as a group and as individuals is one of the ways to do that. And finally, embrace contemplation. And I think that was a simple thing that Flo introduced last time, was just the practice of journaling. Was one way to stop and pay attention. Learning to see. Under the category of rest, or the quadrant, Sabbath, learning to stop. And slowing down. Now, can I say this, that a lot of sometimes when we say rule, we hear try harder, or do more. But a lot of the rule is actually the opposite. It's do less. It's slow down. It's let go. Dan introduced me to a phrase the other day. Man han. It's a Chinese saying which means slow down. Man han. Slow down. I was told Dan at the pool yesterday that in Mandarin it's man zhou. But they said, yeah, both are good. And I was told that by a guy who speaks Vietnamese, Cantonese, and Mandarin, and English, thankfully. Yeah, long-time friend of mine, a Dallas fellow, but we've gone for a lot of walks. So, slow down. So it's counterintuitive to our time. It's often going in the opposite direction. And so practice self-care. Be good to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Boy, that's a huge one. We're not very kind to ourselves. We're not very patient. And one of the worst culprits of that is religion. Religion tells us we're dirty and bad and awful. I was offering spiritual direction to someone recently, and they couldn't handle the fact that Jesus would thank them. Would thank them. It was coming, but there was such an aversion to that. And I thought, that is religion. That's what religion does. Religion blocks us from receiving that. So self-care, being kind to ourselves is so critical. Embrace the gift of limits. There's how often do our limits we see as an annoyance, as in the way? But what if, as Paul said, the limits, the weakness, the struggles are actually an opportunity for God's power to be made perfect in our lives? So just continue to listen. Listen to your heart as we go through these things. Be listening for what resonates, and just maybe tick something on the side of the sheet, if it does, that you need to pay attention to. In relationships, seeing others as Christ. And I was struggling because in the EIHS they said, point others to Christ. And it just didn't sit with me. Didn't sit. It's like that old saying, don't look at me, look at Jesus. I suck, but he's good. Right? But hey, I love this because seeing others as Christ, it's kind of like open-ended, isn't it? Seeing others as Christ can mean you see Jesus in them. I was telling Gordie recently about an encounter with a panhandler over here at Donald's Market, and I just asked him a couple of pieces of fruit, and he looked up, and as I looked into his eyes, he said thank you. And when he did, I felt like I was looking into the eyes of Jesus. It was just this incredible spiritual experience. I told Gordie about this, who used to run our chili wagon. I said, Gordie, it felt like I was looking in the eyes of Jesus. And he just looked at me Straight out, so it's because you were. It's because you were. But there's the other side of that. Seeing people as Jesus sees them, of course, that's part of it too. But seeing them as Christ. So there's kind of we're practicing that. What are practices in our lives and rules that we can implement to not have them invisible? Belonging to a regular small group. Maybe I could bribe you with this one. Regular meals together. I just think that there's a lot of people in our church that are not in a group where they know they can be known and loved. And yeah, there's a cost to that. But even if it's once a month or something like that, but just regular. Crossing barriers, embracing diversity. That's a challenge to love well, isn't it? People that are different than me. Applying emotionally healthy practices to love well. And we got some training in this from the EHR course, Emotionally Healthy Relationships. Just tools to practice communication, good communication, that de-escalate things. And then finally, under the area of vocation, savor the sacred in all things. Embrace all work I have as holy. I think in your note it says as full-time, but holy means whole, in wholesome. In other words, holistic approach to it. All is holy, all is worship. Empower the poor and the marginalized. That has always been heart and soul of our DNA as a church. The story of the chili wagon, story of out of the cold, story of our journey of mutual healing with Lower Post and Indigenous reconciliation. And it keeps us in the center of God's heart. And finally, sharing our gifts generously. Not just material, but who we are. What do I have to offer? What do we as a church have to offer the world? So, what is your yes? And what is the Spirit inviting you to resist? We'll just go to the next slide there, Kim. So Communal Rule of Love is uniquely designed in collaboration with God and one another to counter the gravitational pull of our false self, individually and corporately, in order to love well. You know, the false self isn't necessarily bad at the beginning. It's a survival mechanism. It's a way of this is who I am in the world, and I'm me, and I'm not you, and this is my space, and we need that kind of. But as we mature, as we grow, we find out our real identity is not in what others think of us, and not in how well we've done, or what our gifts are, but that we are beloved children of God. And so gravity is not necessarily bad, but there's a point when Christ's fruitfulness in our lives requires an anti-gravitational help to counter the gravitational pull of the false self that our world operates on so much. So, do we still have the Zoom people?
Not really.
Okay. So, why don't we, for here, just of the 4 quadrants, prayer, rest, relationships, vocation, what is most alive for you? And what is one rule you need to counter the gravitational pull of your false self in order to love well? Let's just listen for that for a moment. So come, Holy Spirit. I'm reminded of the communal rule of love that geese operate with, where you fly farther together than you do alone. 70% more distance. They never leave someone wounded alone. Always one stays, or 2 stays with the wounded one, with the weak one that cannot fly. There's a sense of belonging to one another. They're not isolated and individuals. They have this mutual covenant. And often when they're monogamous, and when one of the geese dies, often the partner will not remate and will stay and grieve for many, many weeks and months. That sense of belonging, so much of the heart of God in this. Lord, teach us. May we learn from your book, from creation. And there's this environment of encouragement. I don't know if it's just autumn and shorter days, but it just seems like there's so much negativism in our world, in the church. Just, if there's something to grumble about, we talk about that rather than what we're grateful about. And I don't want to be insensitive to pain, but it's just, all of us need encouragement. Encouragement means that you give courage to somebody. Discouragement means you take their courage away. And the way they honk at each other, these geese, when one's at the front and she leaves and goes to the back, they don't resent the fact they're no longer the top person there. They honk encouragement to the geese in front of them. Lord, make us an environment of encouragement. Teach us and lead us in this. So I just want to invite you to take this worksheet, take it home, keep it in your journal or in a convenient place where you can begin to develop and work on it with your beloveds, with yourself, with God, with your family, with your household. We're going to continue to work on it as a church together. Our teachers are going to be addressing different aspects of these practices and rules. But let it be a work in process, and can I just say, make it fun. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be a joy, and to design to make to fit who you are and who we are as a church. Amen. So grace, peace, and mercy to you. I invite you to stay and visit if you want for a while. Talk about this to each other. If you have time to just connect and debrief kind of what came out of the reflection time. All right? God bless you.